You're listening to Garibaldi Red, a Nottingham Forest podcast brought to you by Nottinghamshire Live.
Hello and welcome to Garibaldi Red, Nottingham Forest podcast from Nottinghamshire Live. My name is Matt Davies, hosting as usual, and we're here to reflect on the draw with Derby and last night's defeat to Luton Town. Joining me to discuss it is Reds legend Garry Birtles. Hello, Gaz, how are you?
Good morning. I'm very well, thank you.
Good. And returning to the podcast, the perfect guest to have on is one of the architects of last night's win in Luton Town, first team coach Paul Hart. Paul, how are you?
Good morning. Thank you, Matt. Yeah, fine.
Oh, I'm sure you're fine after last night. You should be high as a kite after leaving with the 3 points. How do you reflect on the game then, Paul? You must have been delighted with your team's performance. Certainly after going ahead, you managed the game very well, didn't you?
Yeah, we did. We first half, I thought we were a little bit loose with our passing, and to be fair to Nottingham Forest, they probably had two really good chances to go ahead. But certainly in the second half, at half time, we discussed that and thought that if we were a bit neater, a bit tidier in possession, we would. It would certainly improve our performance, which I think that's what happened. I think we were more careful and we kept the ball better.
What did you make of it from a Forest point of view then, Garry?
Well, I think first half we looked like the team that were going to win the game. But again, when you have that much possession and that many chances, half chances, you have to take advantage of that. And if you don't, you know the opposition's going to come back and they're going to have their fair share of opportunities, which is what happened. Luton in the second half just totally dominated. And I heard stories of Forest looked tired. Well, I don't totally agree with that because Forest have got one of the biggest squads in the Championship. So I don't think tiredness, you can blame tiredness. Everybody's the same. Everybody's having games fast and furious. So, to say, make one of those as an excuse, I don't get that. But it's, you know me, Matt, I'm not big on stats, but I looked up things last night and on an attacking basis, only 4 teams have scored less than Forest this season. And 3 of them are in the bottom 4, Birmingham, Wycombe, Sheffield Wednesday, and the other one's Derby. And Rotherham are in the bottom 3. They've scored 5 more than us, but they're 3 games in hand. And on the defensive side, only 5 teams have got a better defensive record than Forest. And that a lot's down to Joe Worrell. I think he's been magnificent. Paul, as a centre-half, will probably agree. Brentford are in second place, have conceded more than Forest, but have scored 61 goals. That is the difference. There lies the major difference. The disparity that is causing Forest to struggle and Brentford to prosper is there. Brentford conceded more goals than Forest, but they've scored 61. And I'll go to the top teams at the moment. This is why they're at the top. Norwich, Pukki's got 18 goals. Buendia's got 9. Brentford, Tony, 25 goals. De Silva, 7. Forss, 7. Swansea, IU, 10. Lowe, 9. Watford, João Pedro, 9. Sarr, 8. Deeney, 7. Reading, Lucas João, 20. Mate, 6. Cardiff, Kiefer Moore, 16. Bournemouth, Solanke, 10. Stanislas, 7. Gronveld, 7. Stanislas, 10. Gronveld, 7. And Barnsley, Woodrow, 12. Mowat, 5. Styles, 5. There, in a nutshell, tells you why Forest are struggling.
How do you fix that?
Well, you have to get, Chris will know this. We can't score goals. In the final third, we don't look a massive threat. I don't think at the moment. We make bad decisions when we're in good areas. And I think Knockhart's one of the ones who is more guilty of that. He seems to do all the right things until the final moment. And then, the final delivery isn't always good enough. Not just for him. I'm not picking him out. But I think that just generally what is costing Forest, going on and being involved in games more than the opposition. We're not involved in games. If we go 1-0 up, we don't look like going 2-0 up or 3-0 up and running away with it like other teams. It's that Brentford stat really jumped out at me that, they conceded more goals, but 61 goals have scored. We've scored, I think, 28. So that is, for me, is why we're struggling and Brentford are second.
When you look at your boys, Paul, you haven't scored many goals on the road yourselves, have you either? But you managed to engineer a way to find wins. Is that something particular that Nathan Jones has worked on? Have you gone out to be very hard to beat and nick 1-0s, or is that just the way it's panned out?
Can I just say, I'm so happy to work with the group of players. They every day, every week, give their best and play to the extremes. We need that sort of attitude to get results. After that, the manager I've been very impressed with his tactical and strategic nous, and he's changed within games. He's changed the way we play, the way we line up for games to try and get results, and I think he's been successful. And we're a tight group. We've got Chris Cohen there, who I've been really impressed with his knowledge and his detail. We have a bit of fun. We're serious about our jobs. We achieve at times way beyond what people expect.
Well,
Do you think?
I think that's a really important point you make there, Artie. You have fun, and I think sometimes you can overwork players and not have the fun. I mean, we used to, under Brian Clough, the gaffer used to give us a couple of days off when we never expected it. If he thought we looked fatigued, then we'd get a couple of days off. With all these games, I just think the mantra now is they have to come in and train. They have to come in and train. They have to come in and train. And I don't think they do. I think sometimes you say, right, 2 days off, we'll see you, we'll see you in 2-3 days. And that lifts you as a player. It used to lift me. Oh, crap, we've got 2 days off here. You feel refreshed, you go back, and you feel a little bit more revitalised. If you're getting games fast and furious and you're training on a daily basis, you're bound to get a little bit tired, frustrated, fatigued, mind-wise and body-wise. And that can cause problems. Gives players time off now and again. It's not a sin to give them time off. And just going back to the situation with scoring and goal scorers, our top scorer in the league has got 4 goals, and our joint top scorer is own goals. That just, in a nutshell, puts it into perspective. When you've only got a goal scorer in the league who's got 4 goals, that's your top scorer. You're in for a struggle. Without a doubt, it's not rocket science. So I think, players in these difficult times with games coming fast and furious need a little bit of a break. But I'll mention the Premier League again. You heard Pep Guardiola before this run was moaning about players having too many games and tiredness. Now they've gone 21 unbeaten. You don't hear so much, said about, well, we're playing too many games and we're tired, because you're on a run of 21 games unbeaten. So it's one of them.
I'm going to ask about Forest strikers in a minute, but Paul, how much training are you able to do at Luton? So obviously you signed the striker from Walsall, who looks very raw and green, but there's obviously a player there. I mean, how much can you work with a player like that and develop players?
Well, it's difficult because we're playing every 3 days or 3 or 4 days at the moment. It's difficult to get things across, but he's been, I always believe you sign people as much for the way they are. Are they going to learn? They have ability, absolutely, but are they? Do they fit in? Do they? Are they willing to learn? Are they willing to take things on board? And that's a big thing. And he certainly is. And he's a young boy who has got ambitions, and that was his 3rd game last night, I think. And he's done extremely well. And Garry, scoring goals is the hardest thing in football, and it's not easy. And your talent.
That's the Man United fans.
No. Listen, I played against you at Manchester United. You were always a formidable player, and I have utmost respect for centre forwards. I hate them
You didn't
with a passion.
You always used to leave me down in the centre circle and smile at me.
If I could, I would. But the great players are always, Virgil van Dijk's a fantastic centre back, but you always talk about strikers and being able to, we changed at halftime. We had an amazing result on Saturday, and we went 2 up front. You don't often see 2 up front these days. We went 2 up front with a diamond. We started last night. We had to change to get more control in the second half. We changed it to go 4-3-3. But the interesting thing is, we never talk about getting a draw. We always talk about winning a football match, whichever way we can. But to get to that point, we have to be strategic and we have to be tactical, and you have to have players that believe in what you say. And I've got to say that you may be touching on this a bit later, but we do change to try and get a result, to try and get a win. We do change our shape. We do change the way we line up against certain opposition to enable us to give us the best way, we think, of winning a football match.
When we look at Forest strikers, then, since we're talking about those, and obviously, as Paul says, Garry, you know that position as well as anyone. Do you think Murray looks knackered? I mean, I thought he looked leggy for the first time last night, and he's obviously not played a lot of football in a year, and he's 37, and there's tough games coming up. Does Murray look tired, Garry, or not?
I think he's entitled to be tired. At that age, no matter how much you put in and how much physically you put in, you're 37, your body isn't going to react the same as it did when you were 28, 29. When a striker probably is at the physical peak of his powers. So it's very understandable in the modern game now because it's so quick, it's fast and furious, especially in the Championship. And, your reactions aren't the same when you're that age, obviously. I mean, I finished when I was 36 and, your body tells you that there's something not quite right. I can't do this anymore. And despite wanting to go on and on, age catches up with everybody. No matter what sport you're in, it catches up with you. And, Glenn, to keep going to now, has done magnificently well. But Glenn, with all due respect, is not going to get beyond defenders. He's not going to get them with pace. He's great with hold-up play. He's intelligent around the... But you've got to play to his strengths a little bit. And last night, especially second half, he got very little to feed off. But again, it's who do you play? I mean, Grabban was injured again. He scored a lot of goals last season, but he's only got 3 this season. Lyle Taylor's come in. He's our top scorer with 4, but he's not getting a start at the moment. He's just having to come on. And anybody will tell you who has to come on as a substitute with 20 minutes to go, a lot's expected of you, but it's very difficult to get involved in a game straight away. David Fairclough at Liverpool, was a super sub, as he was called. He came on and used to do it, with the click of a finger, but it's not that easy. And, it's unfair to criticise people when they only get those small windows of opportunity to come on and do something. If it pays off, brilliant. I mean, I saw things... I don't do social media, as you know, but I looked on the Forest thing and people were saying, the substitutes made no impact last night. The problem is, with a top scorer of 4 goals, you're looking for other people to, chip in with goals, but nobody else is chipping in with goals. That's the problem. If you've got, somebody, Lyle Taylor, they'll say, he's only got 4, but he's not starting games. So it's unfair to say he's only got 4. If you're starting games and he's played 5 on the trot and he's not scored, then you've got an opportunity to say, well, he's not scoring. But while you're sat on your backside, and then coming on, a little bit unfair. Joe Lolly last season was weighing in with goals. You tell me now, a centre half who's scoring goals. It's a dying art. Harty, you'll know. You used to score goals. Come up for. But John Terry was probably the last one who does that. John Stones is starting to get the knack of scoring goals at the moment. But in modern day football, you don't see many centre halves who are particularly scoring goals. The odd 1 or 2 in the Championship. the Cardiff boy. He scores goals, but it seems to be a dying art. And if you're highly dependent on one person up front, which is what Forest do, play one up front, and nobody else is chipping in, that pressure on the defence and midfield becomes very intense. It pushes you further back, and we saw that second half last night. I think Luton, when they got the ball, countered brilliantly, quickly. They moved the ball quickly. It was 1 and 2 touches. They put the ball in areas where it hurt Forest. And, Joe Worrell has been the one, for me, standout player for Forest. Every game. He's the leader out there, vocal at a very, young age. And you see the goals against. I've already said, only 5 better in the league. That's a lot down to, that back four, one of the best goalkeepers in the league. So the back four are doing their job. But is the rest of the team doing the job? Not as well as they should be, obviously, because the top scorer's got 4 goals. Who else is going to start chipping in? With these games coming up, you just mentioned those games, very quickly, things can change. And you just hope that Forest, as they've done in the past, lift the game against better teams. Last season, they played well against the top teams, but you can't keep relying on that. And if you do, it could get you into trouble. So it'd be an interesting period for Forest now.
There's a lot of people in the comments criticising Taylor for saying he looks a bit downtrodden, and he went down quite easily a lot last night and didn't win his headers, which is what his game's based on. You think that's a bit harsh on him then, Gaz?
I think it is, because again, he's had to come on, and it's not easy to get straight into the pace of the game. In fact, I would think it's more difficult now because the game is so quick, and you've been sat on your backside, you've had a little warm up, and then you're expected to come on as a striker and score a goal to get your team out of trouble. And you may be trying too hard. I think that's the problem. He is a trier, Taylor. He tries. You can see he runs across the line. He tries to block things. His work rate's particularly good, but maybe that's because he comes a little bit too deep, and then you lose you lose what he's good at in the box because he's trying to help out deeper positions. So it's because Lewis Grabban's injured at the moment. Chris has got that dilemma. Who does he play? Who does he start with? He only wants to go one by the look of it. He doesn't want to play 2 up front. He brings Mighton on later on. And, because he's a young lad, maybe he's expected to come and do things. He's got a little bit of pace, a little bit of trickery. It's a conundrum for him. I think Chris now wants the end of the season to come. Stay safe in mid-table or just above the bottom 3 will do, as long as we don't go down. And then give him the summer. Let him build. Let him have that pre-season. You can't criticise him now. Things have got better under him gradually. That result last night, was a little bit of a difficult one to take, because if you win that one last night, you think, well, we're safe with those games coming up. But at the moment now, that defeat will give them a knock in their confidence, and they'll look at those run of games and think, oh, my word. But they can't look at it like that. You just hope that McKenna comes back. I don't know how far he's off. You hope Grabban can get himself fit. They got Amiobi back and on last night, which I think is a bit of a bonus. Kravinovic still looks like he's half decent player. Garner, again, another one who can make things happen. But it's just not happening in that final third at the moment, and that's a concern.
Paul, I know obviously the dressing room's a bit of a sanctuary, but are you able to give us some kind of insight into what was said at half-time, so what changes Luton made and what Nathan Jones said to the players after a tricky first half?
Yeah, we talked a little bit about our marking, because Glenn Murray had I think he won two clear headers, and he had the one that he put over the bar. So obviously we made our players aware of the need to make sure that we mark men and not space. And as I said earlier, we said that we were a little bit wasteful in possession, and that if we could change that, so be more careful, we would make more inroads. And I think those were the biggest changes that we made. We eventually went to from the diamond to a 4-3-3 to we thought we could probably on the counter expose them more from wide positions. So that was the main focus of our halftime talk.
One thing I wanted to ask you about as well, from a coaching point of view, a tactical point of view, is with no fans in the ground, the games to me seem to become a lot more tactical. There's not so many fouls in the games. I mean, I can't even remember a foul in that match last night. Has it become a bit more of a game of chess with less niggle in the games? And does that suit a side like yours, Paul, or not?
It's a difficult one. I'm not sure whether it's the situation, the pandemic, or if football is changing. Certainly, when I'm coaching defensive stuff, I talk less about actually the technique of tackling, more of the principles of defending, of approach, slowing down, showing into areas where a team can be less effective. Maybe it's because I hesitate to say it, maybe because there isn't that extra component that supporters bring, but I'd prefer to think that it isn't. I prefer to think that it is because of the technical changes, that tackling is dangerous in terms of, I don't mean dangerous in terms of hurting people, but I mean referees are more likely to issue bookings. Players fall down at the drop of a hat. I think one of the interesting things is that because of the lack of crowds, I've actually heard screaming on the pitch, which it's amazing. It's enlightened me.
You used to make people scream on the pitch. You did.
No, I didn't.
It was your fault. You made people scream.
No, I didn't.
Look at that innocence.
I just find it hilarious. It makes me laugh when I hear people. Oh, and and you hear it, don't you? It's. I've witnessed it for the first time. It's frightening.
Do you think it has it got softer, Gaz? I mean, looking at that Forest Derby game, it was very different to a typical Forest Derby game on Friday night. Again, I can't think of a tackle in that match. Has the game changed dramatically in the last year?
I think it has. I mean, Stuart Pearce was a guest for Sky and on the live game, and he was sat there, and I was thinking, what is going through your mind? Because he was fully committed, like Paul was fully committed as a defender. And I bet he was dying to come out and say something, but sometimes you've got to hold your counsel a little bit. I think the art of tackling has gone a little bit out the game. You still see, I mean, in the Premier League games, you've seen some decent stuff, some tackles flying in, but I don't think you can blame the pandemic and no crowds for lack of tackling. I still see Joe Worrell. I keep mentioning his name. He's the one standout player for me in the Forest team who goes about his business as a defender should do. He'll stay on his feet till the right time. I think that's half the problem. What annoys me more than anything is the stupidity of players who give fouls away when the opposition player is under total pressure for no reason. Why do they do it? I just don't get it. You watch it, you think, oh, he's under pressure now.
I have a bit of a theory, Gary, that when we played, if you saw an opponent's studs, they actually meant it. And I say this, you actually, the only reason you saw the studs was because they wanted to make their mark. Now you see people studs in midfield areas and people going to ground. My own personal thing is that they're lazy. It's the easy way out, and so you talk about the technique of tackling. I think it's foreign to people, and teach or suggest that we stay on our feet, get close, jockey. You can't take shortcuts as a defender. You have to do the hard miles. And I think if you look at how many penalties that are conceded in football, in league football, you see it every weekend through people just diving in and committing in the box. I can't remember a time I actually tackled in the box. It's stay on your feet and block and show out. I just think, through the academies, we need to get back to teaching the principles of defending all over the pitch. It's important. Gary, yourself. You ended up playing at centre back for many games, but when we played Liverpool, Rush and Dalglish were their best defenders. They committed defenders to giving them the ball. I just think I'm going a bit into the technical stuff here and going away from your question, I feel, but teaching the principles of defending early enable them to become better defenders later on.
Well, I was taught to front. Do what you can to stop defenders coming out easily with the ball.
Yeah.
And that was a job of mine, and I used to thrive. I love running. I love the athleticism of that particular job of trying to stop people, getting past that halfway line. And if they did, then the midfield came into play. By me doing that as a striker, that gave the midfield a chance to push up 5 yards and the back four to push up 5 yards. So you weren't too deep. So if you did regain possession, you're on the front foot higher up the pitch, which, I think, the way Forest play with one striker, that becomes a little bit difficult because you're not scoring goals. So you're having to defend more and you get pushed further back and you end up, just inside your own 18-yard box. And the midfield likewise get pushed further back, and then it becomes a problem. And if you do get possession, as we've seen quite a bit, sometimes you can't break as a team because the distances are sometimes too vast, to get in support. That's a recurring problem, I think.
I must say that if Stuart Pearce was marking Knockout on Friday night, he wouldn't have been showboating like he was. I imagine he'd have put him on his arse. But Knockout had a good second half.
You're allowed to say that on the podcast, what you just said.
I don't know. We are live. Right. So talking of that, we've got a question here, which is interesting following on what you were saying, Gaz, about playing two up top. I know you're a big advocate of it, but it didn't work for Forest last night when they went two up top. Would you still like to see that and take an extra man out of midfield or not?
But that was because it didn't work because we didn't start with two up front, did we? It was only when 1-0 down and you're chasing the game, put two up front. I just like to see defenders occupied. And I think one up front doesn't occupy defenders. It makes it, their life a lot easier. And my job was always to make life very uncomfortable for, centre-halves, defenders, by movements, by backing in, by, having somebody, I knew was going to support me and I could support him. So I think to say that it didn't work, no, because I'd like us to see you start a game with two up front, maybe, because teams don't expect it. And then you think, well, what are the defenders going to think? Oh, hold on a minute, we've got two up front here. We didn't expect that. And you want to put a seed of doubt in defenders' minds. And, it might not work. I don't know. You've got to have two players who are, good enough to play up there as a pair. So I think it's unfair when it's substitutions that you're having a go at that it didn't work. If you start a game and it doesn't work, fair enough. But what else do you do? Do you stick with one up front and have a top scorer with 4 goals? That's like I say, I'm not a stats person, but I went through it last night and I was staggered to see what I actually saw. The commentator who was on the game, he said, Forest top scorer is Taylor with 4 and joint second scorer was own goals, which really staggered me because I don't usually look at things like that. Then I went at the top 6 to see why the top 6 were in the top 6. And those stats are read out to you about goal scoring. You can defend. Paul was a great centre-half. He read the game really well. He was terrific in the air. He was a great leader on the pitch. But he could have drawn 42 games, not lost one, but would have been mid-table or below on points. That's how important scoring goals are. You don't get anywhere unless you've got somebody in your team who scores enough goals. It's simple as that. If you don't get a striker who gets over 10 goals, I mean, we saw that last season. Lewis Grabban got that many goals and Joe Lolly chipped in. That's why Forest were close to the playoffs. Yes, it all fell apart in the final, couple of games. But before that, that's why Forest were up there. Pure and simple. And the defence was good. This season, the defence, he's got the defence right. Chris is terrific with defenders because he was a defender himself. But that stat of 4 goals in March for your top scorer is just not good enough by a country mile.
Where do you stand on 4-4-2, Paul? Because Luton, you don't have £5 million to go out and sign a top striker, so you have to engineer good signings and good tactics, don't you?
Well, I haven't played 4-4-2 for an awful long time, but I have played with 2 up front, but through a diamond. So I don't want to get too much into it, but that enables you to be strong in midfield, in the centre, in the core, and get the 2 up front. 4-4-2. I think we played Cardiff the other week, and they were like that, and they were very direct and physical, and a really tough outfit to play. What if it's 4-4-2? You probably look at it and think that you are giving up something in midfield in the centre, because most teams are 4-3-3 or they get 3 in midfield somehow. But I do like, it's you can watch almost everybody in football, and they are 4-3-3 one way or another, 3 in midfield and 3 up the top. I like seeing 2 up front. It gives you a better chance, as Garry says, of scoring goals. But you can manoeuvre a 4-3-3 as Manchester City do, with getting the wide men in and getting across the front man. And but when you've got players like that, where that possession of the ball can be retained, it's easy to make those fantastic runs that they do because of that. So
you've got the City. They've got Sterling. They've got Mar. Jesus, they've got Aguero to come back, they've got Foden, who comes into the equation. So they've got the players who fit that particular system very well indeed. That's why Liverpool won the title, because the 3 up front, the fullbacks getting forward, you can tinker with it and make it very attacking minded. So I think that's what Chris maybe is looking to try and do, to get those right players in those right positions with the right formation quickly, to make sure that we stay in, the Championship. Luckily, we've got, 40, I think it's 40 points, which in the Premier League is, the holy grail to stay in the Premier League and not necessarily in the Championship. So, I think I said before, just get this season over with, for Chris, and then give him the opportunity to just turn things around a little bit and start the season with his methods, his players. I mean, that squad is massively too big. And I have to mention Barnsley in this. How well they're doing, how well, Luton are doing. They shouldn't be expected to do better than Forest. That's no snobbery or anything like that. But it's, the squad Forest have got, maybe the amount of money to spend that Forest have got, compared with Barnsley's, compared with Luton's, is just a massive disparity. So, they're obviously doing something right, those 2 clubs, and look into why maybe they're doing so well.
I wanted to ask, from a striking point of view, Garry, what do you make of the kind of service they got last night, particularly, but in recent games? They get a lot of crosses in for us, but they don't always come in from, I would say, a good position. A lot of them are from the fullbacks, not in behind anyone, but it's kind of not the kind of angle you'd want as a striker, I'd imagine. Is that fair?
I think you like different angles as a striker. It's all about movement in the box. You can't always blame the crosser if the player's not moving in the box. You see, I can't understand why players don't get across the near post anymore. That is one thing that creates havoc. You've got to, as a striker, you've got to expect the unexpected, and want to get across the near post first, and you can get a touch, and then you can create something behind for somebody else coming in. It doesn't have to be the perfect delivery all the time, but I said earlier, I think in the final third, our quality is not good enough. At set pieces, sometimes knockouts delivery has been really good, but defenders, have defended it particularly well. When we do get in good areas with time to put balls in, I think we try and be too precise. We look up and say we try and pick somebody out instead of putting it in an area where it creates doubt for defenders and goalkeepers. There's nothing worse than that little bit of a corridor between the penalty spot and the 6-yard box. Does a keeper come? Does he stay on his line? What does the centre-half do? Does he stretch for it? If he does, he might put in his own goal. I think the golden rule is don't pick somebody out. John Robertson was, a genius for just putting in an area where he expected me, Tony Woodcock, Peter With, anybody who played up front to be. And if we weren't, he'd say, well, hold on a minute, I've done my job. I put it in an area where somebody should attack it. Like, try to pick people out, puts it in an area, keeps it away from the keeper, and then that's your job to get across your marker and make something happen. And I don't think, that happens enough, maybe at the moment in the modern game. I don't know if Paul will agree or disagree with that, but it's all about instinct in the box. And it's all for defending, it's all about concentration. If you lose your concentration in the box, switch off as a defender, you're done for. You get punished. But as a striker, if you're static in the box, it becomes easy for defenders. If you're waiting for the perfect ball to come in, it's not going to happen. It might happen once in a blue moon and you get a goal. But you have to make things happen as a striker in there. You have to make a good ball, a bad ball, a good ball. It's not all about trying to get a perfect delivery as a striker. It doesn't happen.
Well, as a defender, Paul, where would you not want the ball to be? What would have caused alarm when you were in the box for you?
Well, I think I'm agreeing with Gary. Running back to my own goal is very difficult to handle. I think Liverpool, at their best, perfect examples of putting the ball in areas hard and fast, and picking the right time. When they get to the byline, they stand it up. When they get into the last third, that ball's going in with pace and people running across the near post. How many goals they score at the far post, tap-ins, because of the run at the near post is amazing. They're a perfect example of, and Manchester City. I can only get. I'm only giving those examples, but I know. When we were at Nottingham Forest, if Garry didn't get across the near post, he'd be in for an ear bashing from a certain person at half time. Because that's where goal scorers earn the corn. We're part of the an era where or at a football club with him that we had continuous basic training.
Which kind of leads on to an interesting question from Eric Good for you, Garry, about strikers and instincts. Eric asks, can you teach it? Is it training? Is it down to the manager? I mean, is goal scoring just based on natural instinct, or can it be taught?
No, it can't be taught for me. We used to practice, me and Tony Woodcock, I remember going near post and far post and switching. If one of us started at the near post, then we'd spin, and I'd peel up the far post, and he'd come from the far post across the front line. And that sort of movement just creates all sorts of problems for defenders, because defenders think you're going to stay there. But if you spin and your team goes across the other way, and that quickly, it can cause havoc. Even if you don't get the right touch on it, you get a touch and it can create something for somebody behind. So, instinct. People used to say to me, how did you do that? I said, I ain't got a clue. I was out there and I did it when it came to me. That drag back the Peter Taylor signed me for, it didn't happen all the time, but it was instinctive when I thought it was right to do it. You can't go out as a striker thinking, right, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that. All you can do is say, right, I'm going to go out and I'm going to give it everything I possibly can. I'm going to give it 100%. That's all you can do as a striker. But the rest of it is just pure instinct. Yes, I'll hold it up when it's outside the box. That's my job. That was, one of my strengths, to hold it up for when midfield could come past and, bring them into play. But in the penalty box, it's not extravagant movement. I always say that before. It's a yard, it's half a yard. You go forward, you check back. You just try and create that doubt in the defender's mind. And so, it's not, you can't teach that.
Mm-hmm. I just wanted to turn the conversation to Forest's upcoming games. We've kind of touched on it, but obviously it's a daunting run. They've got Watford, Reading, Norwich, Brentford, Cardiff are their next run of matches. That must set alarm bells off for you, Garry, mustn't it, when you see how they struggled against those teams previously?
It does, it does worry. If like I say, if they'd won last night, I think the pressure would have been taken off a little bit more. That's no disrespect to Luton, without a doubt, because they've done unbelievably well. But that would have put you on 43 points, and if then you threw it away from there. But I was texting with my lad last night with my son, and you talk about last season. Everybody, predicted, we're going to get in the playoffs, and we didn't. And everybody said, saying we look safe, it's okay. And you just worry that it's going to happen at the other end of the table. That's what comes into my mind a little bit. I think we've got enough in there not for that to happen. And sometimes, I said before, we do play better against the teams at the top of the table. The supposed good teams. We did it against West Brom, the Leeds, when they were in the Championship. We did particularly well against a good team. So you just hope that's the case. If you lose all 6, you're in big trouble. If you to draw 1 and lose 3, you possibly take that without a doubt, because that moves you right out of the danger zone. If you win 2 out of those 6, you ought to be safe. But I think with these games coming up, Chris has got to get in his mind his starting 11, his best starting 11, and say, right, we're going to give you this chance. If barring injuries and things like that, suspensions or whatever. Because at the moment, I think he's just trying to pick and choose at the moment. He's trying to keep Glenn Murray as the focal point, which I understand, because he knows him, and his experience can be vital around that box if the service is right. But he's not going to play every game because of his age. So that's one thing he's got to manage. I don't know how far Lewis Grabban is coming back. So does Taylor start in the next game? Be interesting to see. It's very difficult, but you can't be afraid of those games. If you're afraid of those games, there's no point in being out there. There's not one point in being out on that football pitch if you're afraid of those games coming up.
Yeah.
As a professional player, you've got to think, I've got those 6 games. We're going to lose. If we lose all 6 games, you've got to go and say, right, okay, let us put our stamp on this. Let us, not respect them, but not worried about them. And show that sort of mentality, not a scared sort of mentality, a positive mentality. And if you go about it the right way, you might just nick something. I mean, I watched, was it Crystal Palace Brighton the other week in the Premier League? How Crystal Palace won that game, nobody ever knows. You watch that game, Brighton had about 20 odd shots to Crystal Palace's 2. They scored 2, and Crystal Palace won the game 2-1, in the last minute of the game. Who cares? There's no pictures. As we said before, the score says Brighton 1, Crystal Palace 2. Don't care how you win it. You go out and win it. Doesn't matter. And you can do that. Forest win 2 of those games, then you should be safe. And they're capable of doing it because there are good players in that squad. I think, the problem is Chris has just got to get it, right in his mind. And I'm sure, he can do that.
Grabban should be back next week, I think. I think he's back training soon. Paul, what would your message be to a group of players with a very daunting run of fixtures ahead of them? What would you tell them going into 6 very difficult matches?
Bring your tin helmets. It's a brutal league, isn't it? The Championship is different to any other, and it really is. It's been brought home to me how physical. I can't believe how big people are. I didn't think people could grow as big as what I've seen in the last few weeks, but they do. They're massive, and
you're hardly a shrinking violet.
Pardon?
You're hardly a shrinking violet.
No. I look pretty small these days compared to. But I think what you trust in the manager, to find the solutions. experience. Chris is a very experienced manager and been very, very successful. And I have no doubt that he'll be preparing his players for that, as we have to. We have to prepare for these games. We, as Gary has alluded to, we're not a big squad in either numbers or size, and we have to find ways to be able to compete. And we don't accept it, but we know we might come up short now and again. But we know we've got the character and this is me talking. We know how our players. We know that they're very resilient, very trusting, and in the manager, and they've got a bounce back ability. They're very, and it's what you need. You need to move very quickly from disappointment to positive preparation for the next one.
Would you be, I don't know if the word's hopeful or confident or optimistic that both Forest and Luton will be in the Championship next season now?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I don't think I can only speak for Luton Town. I don't think we take anything for granted. We are nearing that point where we can say we may be all right, but we're not there. We don't feel we're there, and we have to. We've got Norwich on Saturday, and they're the best team in the league, and we have to find a way. So with a small squad, we have to think about who plays with a view to Rotherham on Tuesday and the game after. It's a manager's nightmare at the moment, and you have to bow to that experience.
Are you optimistic, Garry, still about Forest?
Yeah, with Chris in charge, I think he has improved without a doubt. We're actually winning games of football. The one mistake against Derby, we should have won that. Bad defending again. He should have cleared it, didn't clear it, and he scores a wonder goal from there. You can't sometimes plan for things like that, but you can clear your lines, and he fluffed it, and he stuck it in the top corner. You win that game, and you go back to last season. Forest at Derby, 1-0 up, and they conceded in the 7th minute of injury time. It's sort of repeating itself at the moment. The one thing I think in Forest's favour at the moment is teams are struggling down at the bottom. Wycombe are struggling a little bit. Sheffield Wednesday are struggling a little bit. Birmingham are. So if these teams keep struggling, that's going to be a bonus for Forest. But you can't guarantee. You don't want to rely on other people's results. You start relying on other teams' results, it's a rocky road you're going down. You've got to do it yourself. You've got to get yourself out of trouble, put yourself safe, and don't rely on those teams below you.
True. I just wanted to finish with a bit of nostalgia, looking back on your days together. I mean, you must look back on those fondly. Do you still catch up and talk about them as a pair, or not, you two?
We haven't done, which is really sad, isn't it? You go your own separate ways in football. That's what happens. You end up in different towns, but luckily, Paul's still in Nottingham, around Nottinghamshire, and he ought to sometimes come into West Bridgford on a Thursday afternoon, if he possibly can, for a wee glass of wine with us when everything's okay. He's not that far away. It'd be nice because you should stay in touch a little bit more, but sometimes circumstances don't allow it. I mean, Paul's workload must be incredible, and his journey time, to and from work is going to put a lot of pressure on him to do. He's got a family to look after as well, and as have I. But you're always there for each other. If you need each other, you're always there. And Paul's, he'll know what I'm talking about. He's been there for me in a big way, and I'm, very appreciative of that. And you have bonds down the years, and they will never ever disappear.
I love seeing Garry, and
calling me Garry, which I find quite off-putting because he never called me Garry.
Baz. I remember going and seeing him when he had his back operation. We went as a group, about 6 of us turned up at the Park Hospital, I think we were in, and went to visit him, playing against him, especially at Nottingham Forest when he was at Nottingham Forest. You put me in there. Pardon?
You put me in there. You're one of the reasons. They told me it was centre half.
Do you know? He was such a good player that I often dreamed about putting him in hospital, but Nottingham Forest was considering where they came from, and we know about the manager, but the quality of person that was at Nottingham Forest was a big thing. Fantastic players, great lads. Garry was one of those, and we've had some fun, and I think that our playing football at Nottingham Forest was serious business, but we always managed to smile, and we had a great togetherness that has lasted. Now, like I say, I have been to one or two get-togethers in West Bridgford, and with John Robertson and Frank's there, and it's whatever. I don't know how he did it, but that man created a legacy that stands the test of time, and it's fantastic.
True. And you enjoyed the odd overseas tour to Australia, as Gary's told us before on this podcast.
Well, he gives me some stick because I don't remember this by any means, but he says I pulled my hamstring getting up the airplane steps at Heathrow, but I don't believe that.
So why were you
I think that was the legacy of a long, hard season where
if you would have been going there. So I can remember you skipping up those steps as if it were yesterday. Saw your hand go on your hamstring.
Ooh.
And you had 3 weeks in Australia of sun, swimming, sand, drinking, and
well, it was the football that stood out in my mind, but those things may have happened. I'm not sure.
Excellent. Right, we shall leave it there. Thanks very much, gentlemen. Garry, you very kindly not commented on my terrible haircut after our discussion last week about hair.
How can I? I can't comment on anything with mine. There's very little.
Certainly can't.
There's more at the back than there is the front, unfortunately.
Short back.
Right. Thank you very much, gentlemen. I very much enjoyed that conversation. We shall be back next Wednesday with David Prutton to talk about, hopefully a good result for Forest at Watford. Hope everyone has a good weekend, and we shall see you all soon.